once more. Welcome to the NeuroDivergence podcast. My name is J. Robert Parker, joined today by Molly Lou and Jess. How are you guys doing? Welcome back.
Good.
So,
We're good.
how's everyone's week been going? Everyone doing interesting, fun things, all of that good stuff. Molly, you've been working on something interesting with resources.
Yeah.
What's
So,
going on with
yeah, I've been working on creating more resources in my blog. And the one that I'm working on specifically right now is creating like a list of different options for people to get diagnosed online because resources are so hard to come by in a lot of areas, especially like a specialist that can actually recognize different neurodivergences. And like the different information about it, like some of them take insurance, some of them have like membership plans and whatnot. And then like some of them can prescribe from online because they have like in each state, in order to prescribe, you have to have a prescribing physician or psychologist in the state to do it, right?
that?
So you can't across states. So it's really awesome to have like these resources. And ADHD and autism in particular, like I've realized how many of them, like looking at the ones that are, you hear advertisements for constantly, they don't really diagnose neurodivergence. It's like anxiety and grief.
Depression.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But they're very specific ones for ADHD and autism.
Yes.
Like they're individual too, which is funny because
the thing
the
I
overlap.
see advertised a lot, and we're not going to name any specific company
Right.
names, but if you watch YouTube or anything like that, what companies are really pushing you.
Or listen to podcasts.
And
a lot of them are advertising.
They really front load anxiety and depression. Let's treat your anxiety and depression.
Because everyone has it.
And that's the thing. Kind of just speaking for myself, almost all of my clients have anxiety or depression. That's not the problem. The anxiety and the depression are symptoms.
Yes.
And
Well,
so
right.
by
You have
just
to distinguish.
yeah. Why are you
Not
anxious?
everyone has a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
Actually, most people don't have a chemical imbalance.
Right.
That's
So
actually
we have to
pretty
differentiate the people who actually have a chemical imbalance and really do need medication
Yeah.
to help them regulate versus people who could be drastically helped and their lives improved by other interventions and learning
Absolutely.
tools that they can carry forward the rest of their lives.
And even those with clinical depression, with clinical anxiety, like these are brought about by actual chemical imbalances. There are still things that you can do to
Right.
improve that situation.
Right. The
Like-
meds alone hardly ever
Yeah.
solve.
They're not the
symptoms.
solution.
Right.
Exactly.
For anything though,
No.
really. Like
Yeah.
even like let's look at like blood pressure medication, right? Like
Mhm.
my husband had really high blood pressure, right? Then he finally dealt with diagnosis, got on a stimulant, he got on Adderall, and his blood pressure just dropped into normal range. He was really
Wow.
nervous about it going really high.
Yeah.
Because it's a stimulant, right?
Mhm.
But he was so much less stressed out because he was treating his
He was
like,
functioning
ADHD.
better.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that really
And to
speaks
understand
the
those
symptom.
nuances, like
Yeah.
finding a doctor who understands those
Yes.
nuances and looks at you as a whole person, that holistic approach, right,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
so vital and yet so hard to find.
Right.
Yes. And
And-
particularly, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say too, like we were going back to that, like the treatment thing with it, right? Like I'm on Adderall as well. And I remember when I first got on it at 17, right? It was completely a different experience than now because I learned how to be on Adderall, right? But they don't give you these, like nobody actually teaches you. Even I was in therapy for most of that time, especially in my early years. And like prescribed by the therapist, right? And they didn't teach me how to use Adderall appropriately. So I didn't realize it, but I was definitely abusing it to some degree because I thought the solution was more Adderall, right? I thought
Same.
like I was
More
that
drugs.
broken that I need to keep upping my dose. And now
Same.
I'm actually on the dose that I started at 17. And but you have to build the skills and the tools to supplement the medication. They work in tandem. You can't just be like, I have ADHD, this medication will turn it off.
And that's
Like,
really part of the
ADHD.
problem with the culture that exists is, and you look at the advertisements, which I'm kind of baffled that we can advertise drugs on television, but
You can't in all countries, though, right?
no.
You
It's
can in the
big
United
pharma.
States, but in a lot of countries you cannot.
Yeah. Well, and everyone listening in the United States and anyone listening outside is going to be absolutely baffled by this. But one of the familiar cultural things about living in the U.S. is seeing that commercial that lists one or two things that a drug helps and spends the next 3 minutes listing side effects
Right.
while showing you a picture or a video of somebody running through a field of daisies, explaining how this thing for restless leg syndrome may or may not give you a heart attack or stroke.
Well,
And it's just a natural thing. It's weird. And one of the big things that I never understood until I lived where I lived is accessibility of care. Because
yes.
I grew up in a major metropolitan city and everything was everywhere 24 hours. Didn't matter what you needed, there was a 24-hour, always accessible version of it. Now, I live in a town of 1,000 people with the closest actual thing that qualifies to as a city being an hour away. There is no, like, medical care is difficult to come by. Mental health care, practically unheard of. It is not something that you really have access to around here.
Even when you do have access to it, okay? So when I lived in New Hampshire, where I originally got diagnosed, the fucking process to get my prescription, like, this is for ADHD, okay? Right? I struggled with it, and I still struggle with executive functioning. So the more things there are to do, the harder it is.
The more hoops to jump through.
It'll make you jump through more hoops to get this prescription, so that people who don't need it don't take it. But it also makes it inaccessible to the people that need it. Like, literally, I kid you not. So there's a 3-day window that you could call it in early. Okay, you had this 3-day window. You would have to call it into your doctor, who would have to do a written prescription, and you just have to hope he's there that day. Okay?
Right.
That's it. Sign it himself. No other doctor can sign it. And then you have to go physically pick it up from the hospital. Okay? Then you have to physically drop it off at the pharmacy. You have to hope that the insurance hasn't decided you need
a generic or
a pre-authorization, right? Because they randomly surprise you with a pre-authorization that it needs to be done, which means that they have to do back and forth with the doctor again, like 3 different times between the pharmacy, the insurance company, and the doctor, right? And then they have to actually fill it. And by the time every time a pre-authorization needed to happen every 3 to 6 months, I would be like, I guess I won't function for the week, like, because it takes that long. And it's totally inaccessible. And how is anybody supposed to, like, the quality of care that requires is insane. So moving to Vermont, I was like, I can't leave here because my medication's easy to get. Like, it's not easy, but it was functional because they can transfer a lot of that digitally without having to
that
run
makes
around.
a difference. Right.
You mentioned something that I think Bear's talking about because I know it's a major theme in my life, and I'm sure it is in both of y'all's, is the executive functioning thing. And however you want to refer to that, referring to it as adulting or peopling or whatever have you. It's kind of the same thing. Like, it's all kind of fun ways to joke about your difficulties with executive functioning. And
because humor is all we have.
Yeah, exactly. And what is executive functioning for those of us out there that don't know? I mean, it's what it's said. It's It's peopling. It's adulting. It's
Yeah.
it's going about your day-to-day life.
It's that part of your brain that not only makes the decisions for all of the tedious little bullshit that you do all day, it's the part of your brain that then has to get your body to implement it. So if you're struggling with executive, right, if you're struggling with executive functioning, like, you may find that you'll be sitting there on the couch or something. Man, I really need to get up and do the laundry. Man, I really need to do this. All right, here I go.
And nothing happens.
I'm gonna check my phone real quick.
2 hours later, you're like, how am I still sitting here? And then you get frustrated a lot of times. And the more frustrated you get, the worse your executive functioning comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And so many things can make the executive functioning harder and more challenging. And we've been talking about that a lot, like the three of us on the side, right?
Mm-hmm.
About the emotional, like only recently I realized how much emotional labor that I take way too much on personally of. It's just my personality, right? I think we all do. And how that literally will just drain your executive functioning like it's a battery. And you're like, I guess I'm tapped out. I can't.
Right. What stories are we telling ourselves around the task at hand too, right?
Yeah.
So
yes. Well, this is that anxiety and depression. That's related to neurodivergence. It's all tied together.
And that sensitivity, like, what are we tying that to? Like, there have been times in my life where I go to do a load of laundry and I have a whole existential crisis about what kind of detergent I'm using and how much water I'm using, and is it hot or is it cold? Am I like killing the planet?
Yeah. Perfectionism and guilt is that anxiety, right? Like constantly reassessing, like, is this the right one? Because I don't have certainty all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's realizing that you won't always have certainty.
Yes.
And
that's
one of I believe, again, this is Rumi, because I find quotes everywhere, but I saw something that it was the quote was, if you can see the path ahead of you, then you're on someone else's path. And that kind of showed me
that's so good.
That's why I love Rumi. Like, his stuff always hits right where it needs to. And it made me feel better about being unsure, about even being unclear about tasks. Even I'm walking my own. I'm doing my own thing. So it's not clear how this is going to work out. That's part of the journey. Expectations can only be applied if you are not walking your own path. And so many times, with my personal experience, problems with executive functioning, either personally or societally, are judged as laziness.
Absolutely.
That's what they look like externally. Well, even in my own house, right? Pat and I. Okay, I guess I'm using his name now. My husband and I.
We can edit it out.
Yeah, we can edit that. We'll get it post.
No, it's fine. I'm pretty sure you could Google it and find it. Like, there's no privacy in the world. So, anyway, so we both have it, yet sometimes we forget and we get frustrated with each other. And I'm like, why can't you just help me with this? Like, he's so much bigger than me. So it's so helpful. He does like a lot of the heavy stuff that I can't handle. And I'm like, I just desperately need you to do this. You've said you would do it 2 weeks. I've been patient. Why? What? Like, we'll occasionally even say to each other, like, what's wrong with you? And then we're like, wait.
That conditioning.
I personally know what's wrong with you.
Yeah, I already, that's a rhetorical question right now.
Right. Right. And then we're both like, oh, okay. This is us projecting our own frustrations on each other. Like, because we get it.
So, I'm sure a lot of people listening right now.
There's nothing wrong with you.
Oh, no, there's nothing at all wrong with you. At all. And we all absolutely get it. So,
and the harder you are on yourself with it, this is the one thing that I've learned, okay? The one thing that has changed my life about it, right? The harder you are on yourself, the meaner you are about this, the more you berate yourself in your head and do all that negative self-talk. Like, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? I'm so lazy, right? That all makes it harder to do the thing because you're draining your battery on emotional labor that doesn't need to happen. You're literally making it impossible for you to do the thing by beating yourself up about it.
So
And then you've got negative associations with it the next time
Yeah.
it comes up.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's huge.
We
An
haven't
aversion,
really-
the avoidance aversion of like,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't really discussed self-talk at all, and this would be a good time to really touch on that, because speaking for myself, I talk about that a lot with my clients, and it's a big thing.
oh, I thought you were going to say with yourself.
And it is a big thing
That
with
too.
myself. But yeah,
No,
that
we
was
really
one of
were
those
talking about that.
big changing things. And so what we mean by self-talk is exactly what it sounds like. For example, let's say that you set out to do a thing and you fail. How do you talk
Hey,
to
hold
yourself
on.
at that point?
We have to
Fail.
define.
Failing.
Yeah.
Actually, you just said fail. I want to point out is
Yeah.
negative self-talk.
Yep. That's kind of part of the point. Is how do you view that using your language, using the way that you address yourself? Because the subconscious is interesting in that it doesn't really differentiate between fact and fiction, and it can't really. It's not that it doesn't, it can't. And so whenever you say things, it listens. It takes that as the truth. So if you
Mhm.
tell yourself you failed, if you tell yourself you suck, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't, it believes those things. And so when you tell yourself, let's say you have to do laundry and it's bad, and you sit here and you tell yourself, oh, this laundry is going to suck, it's going to take hours, I'm going to be miserable and hot.
Guess what?
Yeah,
It sucks. It takes hours and you're miserable and you're
Yep.
not.
100%.
You wrote that story.
You wrote
You
that
wrote that
story.
story.
Yeah.
And that is manifesting. You manifested it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Well, and
Absolutely.
so the other day, right? Like even if what? Was he
Oh,
still
I was
talking?
just thinking, but when we can catch ourselves, here's
Yes.
another thing that can happen. You catch yourself and you're like, then you beat yourself up
Mm-hmm.
for having done it. You correct yourself, but
And
when
then beat
vengeance-
yourself up more.
Negative self-talk about the
It's
fact
like-
that you admit, like, I'm so
Yes.
disappointed in myself for being mean.
Yeah,
to myself.
I told
Like, I'm
myself
not
I
supposed
suck.
to
I'm so
talk that way to
disappointed.
myself.
Yeah.
So
And,
it's like really training yourself.
and that's what it is.
Compassionate.
It's
I
a
think so.
training.
Compassionate to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
To, like, treat yourself like a fragile little flower. Like, you know?
You're so precious.
Yeah, like I started to say the way you would talk to a child or a puppy, but not
Well-
everybody does that kindly either.
Well,
So
if you're struggling with
Yeah.
negative self-talk, you're more likely
You should.
going to be frustrated with a child or a puppy for doing something imperfect.
Yes.
So, well, and I don't know where I was going. Never mind.
Oh, that's fun. That's what I tell my clients, though. I tell them usually after I get to know them a little bit, so I know that they aren't the type of person it would be a negative suggestion for, to really screen everything in terms of self-talk through, would you say that to a child? How would you feel if that was said to you as a child? And
Well,
really,
it was.
or likely
That's
was.
the thing.
Yeah,
The
that's the
voice.
funny thing.
That's
And-
what I always say to people, though. The voice that you talk to your child with becomes the voice inside their head when they get
Mhm.
older.
100%. And I one of the things I like to have people observe is, who is the voice in your head and what are
Is
they
this
like?
yours?
Is it yours and is it kind? And
Mm.
I've sometimes had people say the voice inside their head is not their own, that it is often a parent or a sibling or a former
teacher.
significant
Yeah.
other, teacher.
right.
And
All those imprints.
and it really, that's the thing I've come to realize, like with my own kids and in myself, is how much our experiences imprint. Because I
Mhm.
have teachers from decades and decades ago that I still remember things they've said to me.
Yeah.
I-
Or
I-
you think deeply about them and you're like, I really hope they're doing well
Yeah.
because they changed my fucking life by
Oh, yeah.
treating me like a human.
There are specifically 3 teachers I can name, because I was a weird kid in high school and in school in general, that legitimately made a difference on my life, and I still
Mhm.
have that impact today. And it's one of those things that you really have to consider, like the impact that you have on others, the impact that others have on you. And it's
So,
Go ahead.
I call these adults, especially with children, I created a whole term for them because of how powerful it was in my life, right? And I call them catalyst adults, right? Because I think of when shout out to Miss Chang Nielsen, who taught 5th grade. She literally was my best friend for a while. Like, I would spend my weekends helping her in the classroom because
Miss Mogstad in high school.
Yeah. It's like the safe place that I could go. I would go to the playground, I would go up the fire escape and knock on the door, and she would let me in.
That's
and then I would help her do stuff. And I remember that being a year of peace in that classroom, you know? Also, she introduced me to astrology, which was cool, but it's you think about these people, these little touchstones that made it possible for you to not sink down to rock bottom.
Yeah.
Right? The people that gave me hope are the reason that I'm here today and able to give other people hope.
Yeah. And it's important, especially when we're struggling with self-talk, with just getting the laundry done, to remember those
There's
people.
A great reframe, though.
Yeah.
So, instead of asking, how would you talk to your kids, maybe you also ask, was there a person in your life that was that touchstone, that was that, person who got you through a tough time? How would that person talk to you?
How would that person address you? Yeah.
And we have to remember the negativity bias that our brain has. So that's going to be manual. It's not going to be automatic.
Oh, yeah.
Because
it's
the amount of experiences you've had, most of us, thankfully things are changing now. And our kids are getting, on average, I think, a better start because we're more educated. Mm-hmm. But growing up in the latchkey era, it was this is what you did. This was the choice. There was no other resources. There was 2 books out for parenting.
Yep.
And they were
and the internet was non-existent.
Right.
Yep.
So nobody understood. They just used the common knowledge that they had, and they all parented similar. So most of us have that voice in our heads. And the other thing that's really important, right? It's okay to share that out loud sometimes, right? I find I'm hearing this voice, and if it's affecting me outwardly, I have 2 options. If it's somebody that I'm friends with and feel safe with, I can just be oh man, I'm really having a hard time with this. And that really helps erase the voice because it's soothing and comforting, and I'm reaching out. Or I can clam up and withdraw, and I probably will avoid that person a little bit because I associate it with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how just naming it out loud, maybe it's just my personality as well, but naming it out loud often really changes the experience, because
it stops you from ruminating on it.
Well, right, and you realize half the time how silly it is when you see the reaction of the other person, and they're
or you can be reminded, that's so human.
Yeah.
Right. Well, when they react to you in a way that's obviously just organic, right? And they're just very clearly oh, that's never occurred to me, or I struggle with that too,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that relatability that's important. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a client that I ask the question, well, what does that mean? Or what happened? And they start to say the words, and they stop halfway through, and they look at me and go, I have never thought of it like that. I have never said those words.
Because you can think it, and it's on the edge of your mind, right? It's on that cusp of your subconscious, but you have to pull it forward to
put it into actual words,
it, right? Wow, I realized I've been thinking this on the cusp of my consciousness for years, and then I never even thought it didn't actualize until I said it.
It's important,
and there
to
were
give
so many
voice,
right? Because there's so many things we were trained or subtly even taught not to talk about.
Yeah,
right? Most things, anything that has to do with our pain.
If you were taught to be polite and have a certain kind of etiquette, or if you were in a culture where children weren't supposed to talk unless they were talked to, or you're not supposed to talk about money, you're not supposed to talk about sex, there's all these off limits things that you
taboos.
Can't talk about, right? Then you only have your own internal experience, and you're limited what you viewed
Yeah.
of these things. So you have no idea if that's normal human experience, if that's common, if that's like
And it's here's a
really,
hint. It's
if you're
normally a
being too
normal
hard
human
on yourself,
experience.
if you
All
if you're
those
having
things,
unrealistic expectations of yourself.
You know
all
what
of those things that you think are weird, 100% just a human experience.
We're all
Guarantee
weird,
you.
though.
Yeah,
We
just
all of
wanna
us.
pretend we're not.
Every single human on this planet is weird as hell. I can guarantee you that.
If they
it's-
allow themselves to be, right?
Oh,
If they
behind-
make space
on a
for it.
level, they are, even if it's behind closed
I don't know,
doors.
man. I know a lot of people that are not.
Yeah,
Like,
but those are the people that like
oh, they're
Well,
miserable.
do you think
and end up
it's
eating
repression
birds for a living.
or-
What?
Oh, go ahead. I said those are the people that just end up like doing weird things like eating yard birds for a hobby and things like that. But
Well,
go
I have a lot of family that likes to pretend that they're normal, and they just smother it inside of them, and then they don't have close relationships, right?
Mhm.
Like, they're not capable of having intimate relationships because they withdraw so much that all of their relationships are superficial. Like, that's what really happens. And one other thing that I noticed in parenting is that a lot of parents, especially with how busy we are today, right? A lot of their interactions with their kids are just the criticisms, just the disciplinary things. And that's how it was growing up for me too, right? It's like, oh, this is my job as a parent, right? To point out your flaws so you stop doing them. But
or to problem solve. It's like putting out fires.
Yeah.
That's all a lot of parents have time for.
Right, exactly. It's so hands off, and there's no relationship built there, right? So then all they're hearing are the criticisms. So we in my house, we're trying to be careful with that, because especially if you have a neurodivergent child, they're going to have a lot of little things to criticize. And it's just like, know that they know most of it isn't.
You're not pointing out anything new.
Right. They're pointing it out to themselves in their head, but they did it impulsively, or, they can't, it was just like they didn't have another option to replace it with. They didn't know what else to do, because you just point out that they can't do the thing, and you don't help them figure out what to do instead.
Well, one of the things that stuck out was like your kid, who when she was, I think it was sneaking food.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
you
could have though. And I thought about the way I was brought up, and I would have just been yelled at, grounded, made to feel humiliated, ultimately, rather than explain what you were thinking and feeling. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me give a little context.
Yeah.
So also, in my family, right, we're all very advocacy orientated, especially around neurodivergence, for people that are listening. So I have her consent to talk about these things. And I specify before I talk about each individual one. But so we both have ADHD, and we are navigating the impulse control majorly. And one of the things is sugar. Okay? Because sugar is an instant dopamine hit, and it's readily available. And she's at this tween age where she is home for short chunks of time on her own, if I just run down the street to the store or whatever. And I know, I have to be mindful, because when I come back, there's often shame pudding cups hidden somewhere, or which we don't, that's just an example. We don't have a lot of pudding in our house. We eat pretty well most of the time, but so she messaged me on her little messenger app on her tablet, and she was like, "I'm so sorry. I tried to tell myself to stop eating that little Snackwell cake thing, but my brain just wanted it so bad, and before I knew it, I was just eating it." And I was like, okay, well, I'll just figure it out with you when we get home. And we did some I had her do some journaling, and ultimately she ended up making a little comic about it, so that she could start to begin to see the patterns in emotion, right, that are happening, so that we can come up with some replacements. And, we haven't had a whole lot of success yet, but
Hasn't been had a whole lot of time yet.
But the fact that she has the self-awareness, and that
Mhm.
she's communicating effectively about it.
That she's
That's
willfully
huge success.
communicating how she
Well,
feels.
let me clarify success, okay? We've had a lot of success in the sense that her as a person, right? My goal as a parent is to help my kids become well-developed, balanced humans so that they can navigate the world as adults with as little scars as possible and as many tools to navigate it in a healthy way. Whereas I feel like a lot of parents feel like their job is to make sure that their kid is obedient. And that's never my plan, even though it's exhausting and hard, because my kids are just not obedient at all. But that's not the goal. So, of course, they're not. I'm not either. And so, like, navigating that, right? Like, most people would be like, what can I do to get the result I want, which is for her to stop doing it, right? Like, how do I get her to stop doing it without looking at, like, that's the external experience you're having. But there's so much more to that, right? There's a right way to do it, like a respect-based way and a fear-based way. And the fear-based way is going to be faster in the short term, but in the long term, you have to look underneath the surface. These are the reasons that we're all so fucked up emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell walking down the street looking at someone, but inside their head, who knows what they're thinking about themselves and their lives? Probably nothing good, you know? And it all started here, where our parents wanted to get the result. They had good intentions most of the time, you know? They wanted that end result of obedience, right?
Or they wanted us to succeed in a world that requires
obedience.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't consciously wanting you to be an obedient adult, but they wanted you to be successful in life. They wanted you to survive and be successful in this society that we live in.
Right. And I think, though, too, that the cognitive process of figuring out, okay, I need my child to be obedient, I don't think that a lot of parents realize beyond that, because they don't think about their child as an adult very often.
It becomes the lens that you view your it's like self-talk or anything like that. It becomes the lens with which you view this thing from. And if the lens that you view your child through is only one of obedience and compliance, that's not a relationship. That's not a relationship, and that will be all you see. It will color the way you see, the way you perceive with that person. And the things they'll tolerate when they get older. Even like going back to that simple example of all the parents that, you know, in the 80s and 90s were like more corporal punishment, right? More physical. Like the hitting and the spanking and the aggression, right? That teaches them that when somebody you love doesn't like what you're doing, they can hurt you. Yeah. And is that what you want them to feel when they're older and having a relationship with anybody else? The association is very, very powerful. One of the ones that I never realized that my partner pointed out to me was in America, in Western society, little girls growing up, we teach them that when little boys are mean to them and bully them, that's a sign of affection. They like you.
It's horrible.
Whoa.
So, I just want to also say about that, I've been talking about this recently with a friend, and so when little kids don't know how to express that, they get all awkward and they might do something inappropriate, right?
I mean, it's understandable where it comes from, but it's what it teaches.
But we have to teach more than that, and that's the thing, right? It's we simplify things to the point that it's a problem, right? Instead of teaching, well, they must like you,
but they don't know how to communicate their emotions.
Teaching that wasn't okay, and it sounds like something they were uncomfortable about, maybe how they felt with you, and they didn't know what to do. Do you think that's possible? And open up the conversation.
Well, teaching kids how to communicate effectively. And you have to adjust that based on their developmental stage, right? So, like, simple, but like teaching self-advocacy at a very young age instead of that corporal punishment. You just get punished when you don't do what you're supposed to do, and you're not allowed to tell anybody if you don't like what's going on.
And the world is black and white. Yeah.
Yes, and then these mixed messages about, social behavior. So if we can break it down to like, make kids feel comfortable openly communicating and asking questions when they don't understand someone's behavior.
Right.
And
like how my daughter was able to message me before I even got home.
Yes.
Because I made it clear the most important thing
Safety
to me is that
around
you're not
communication.
sneaking around me, because I can't help you without it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't help you if I don't know how, if I'm not there.
And see,
Safety
my
around
own
communication.
mother, I remember, and this has probably led to a lot of my own personal communication issues, but just as an example. So I remember when I was young, like 11, 12, my mother having a conversation with me about sex and condoms and about how she was a safe place, and if I ever needed condoms or needed to talk, to come to her, and we would have that discussion. Well, 16 came around, and I had that discussion, and I got grounded. And
Right. Like she
It's-
regurgitated something that she thought she was supposed to say
but
without
did not follow
planning on following through.
And that really, it's one of those things that took me a lot of time to figure out how exactly that affected me, because it's a memory that stuck out for a very long time.
Right. Like, now what's your relationship with sex?
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Now, fine.
Or with
Before,
honesty.
bad.
Now.
Before, bad.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
yeah. That's the thing. Growing up as a young adult, my relationship with sex and honesty, specifically those two things, terrible. Absolutely terrible. Because
we make
of
sex so weird though with
Oh,
kids,
yeah.
because we don't think of it as a normal human process. We like we
Add
we're
all
like,
the shame.
yeah, shame. That's the big
Yeah.
thing.
right, or like we do it in subtle ways, right, where we're like acting like shocked if you're accidentally, I don't know, I'm openly like, I don't wear pants a lot and stuff like that. But like, I know growing up in my house, I don't remember seeing my mom ever not fully dressed for the day most of the time. Like, very rarely. Like, yeah, she was in pajamas, but even then they were like matching pajama sets, and they were like flawless.
Mhm.
I mean, and then I would go to my aunt's house, and she would just like walk around naked half the time. Like, she'd get out of the shower and like walk to the kitchen without a towel on even. And I was like, okay, this is different. And I just
But was there ever any discussion around why it was different, or why one household had one set of
Never.
standards for how they presented their bodies versus the other one? And then,
no.
because everybody has
It's the
their own
things you
stories
don't
about
say.
it. And yeah. And then there's no explanation for like,
Well, right. What was I going to do? Go talk to my mom about
Yeah.
nudity? Like, that wasn't going to happen.
yeah.
Yeah. And you always hear that whole, it takes a village to raise a child. And like, that's part of one of the reasons for that is questions, communication, teaching, all of that. So kind of to loop things back, I had you present that story about your kid
Oh, yeah.
for a reason. And we were talking about executive functioning, and we were talking about doing the thing, basically. And if you don't want to do something, like let's say you hate doing laundry, well, your entire life you have just not liked it. That's just been a thought in your head, an association.
Or you've had a hard time doing it, right?
I have difficulty with this task.
Or I'm bad at this.
So
Right.
why? So voice that why. Speak it out loud. Write it down. I do not because. And then write down what you think. And it might be ridiculous. It might be something that you never considered. But rather than just make the assumption of, I don't like this because, or I just don't like this. It's, I don't like this because. Why?
Mm-hmm.
What are the reasons? And it doesn't have to be a logical reason. It can be illogical.
Right.
It can be, I feel
Our
like
subconscious
this.
is illogical.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It could be, I don't like doing laundry because I feel like there's a monster in the corner. Like, because you felt that way as a kid in the
The
laundry
basement
room
lights
growing up.
buzz and make me
Or-
uncomfortable.
Or your
Or-
sibling dumped out in the corner at one point, and now you just dissociate it.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
Or that one time I put a red sock in and everything turned pink and I got
Yeah.
grounded. Or
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're a negative association, and it could be something like that. But it's like I said, how many times has a client said, "I've never actually given voice to that," and it's
Right.
part of that
Right.
whole thing. Why don't you like doing this thing? How do you feel when leading up to it? How do you feel when you're doing it? Because personally speaking, a lot of the things that I avoid, that I don't like to do, once I'm doing it, sometimes I even enjoy it. And that's
Right.
the wildest thing.
because sometimes it could just be a little shift if you identify what it is that's irking you about the task.
What is
or
stopping you from beginning?
the root cause
Yeah.
of your like negative association with it. Sometimes it can be the smallest shift to change
And
your
it's-
relationship with it.
It's voicing that thing, whatever it may be, that's so effective. Because is it the starting that you have a problem with? Is it you're excited to do it until you do it and then you don't enjoy it? And then why?
Well,
and
and sometimes
actually give voice to all these things.
it's as simple as it being boring
Mhm.
or tedious.
Yeah, in which case that's
How
easy to fix.
exactly?
with,
How do
like-
you fix that? That's all
Yeah.
it is.
What else can you do to stimulate your mind?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I burn through podcasts and audiobooks and online courses, and
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's
And for
part of
some
the
people,
reason
it
to
may
give
be that
voice. Go ahead.
they do better when they have social interaction
Yes.
while doing a task. Like, not me
Call a friend.
personally, but yeah, call a friend.
well, experiment with it, right? Like,
Yes.
you know, I've
Permission
also-
to experiment. People, that comes with that failure thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, I have to do it the right way. Well, there
Right.
is really no right
What is
way.
right way?
Well,
Yeah.
All of life is a big experiment, and the more we can embrace that and get comfortable with that,
It's a
it's all a
process.
trial and error and a process
Mm-hmm.
to find out what works for each individual in each circumstance and each environment. It's all just a big experiment.
So
Also
ahead.
with that, it's like looking at it and being like, okay, hold on. I also don't have to do it in any one specific order, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
some people might wash their pants every single time they wear them. Other people might find that they can get 3 wears in, right? It all
Yeah.
depends. And also, right, like I have a friend who has just leaned into and accepted the clean laundry pile that their family all just digs through.
Right.
And they're all used to it. It doesn't
Instead of
bother them.
I got one
imposing some rule on yourself
yeah,
put
exactly.
there by society or some voice somewhere along the way,
Right.
you get to decide for yourself how you want your life to look, how you want your chores to look, how you want your laundry to look.
One of the things I read one time is that you're an adult. You can literally go outside and just lick leaves, and the universe will just be all right.
It literally changes nothing. And if
It's
that's what
literally
you're doing,
just
it's
nothing.
fine.
There.
Except for maybe like if you catch something.
So here's
Like equal eye.
here's a secret for everybody that I learned relatively recently, and that's no one has any idea what's going on. No one has any idea how to people, and
Or
we're
why
all
we're fucking here.
or why we're here, and we're all just making up arbitrary rules along the way. So if you want to pick your laundry out of a
Are
pile,
you saying there's no authority? There's no expert? There's no...
yeah, it's almost like that. It's
So-
almost like being a human is an individual experience. And if you want to keep your laundry in the pile, you go ahead and keep that laundry in a pile. If that's
So-
how you people.
I'm a huge fan of Kurt Vonnegut. Like,
Oh, yeah.
very huge. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes of his, actually all of them are my favorites, but I tell you, we are here on Earth to fart around, and don't let anybody tell you different.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
but like he was super successful, and all he did was like derp around, like always. And I feel like honestly, like leaning into that builds success because, like, I mean,
It's
for me,
genuine.
before I
Well-
figured it out, I had this big depression episode, right? And then I was like, okay, I'm going to spend time working on, you know, like being more comfortable in my body. And then everything started coming together when I like figured out like what was going on with myself more, you know? Like
Mhm.
you drive yourself in the right direction to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. I
Exactly.
think that quote takes the pressure off,
Mhm.
but there are also people who feel very much driven to do something specific while they're here.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's part of their
that's
happiness.
legitimate too,
Yeah,
right? So I
exactly.
think it's really about just embracing who you
Who
are
you
and
are
what
specifically.
your
Farting
personal
around.
drives are. For
Yeah,
some
that's-
people,
yeah,
it may
no, that's their farting
literally
around.
be farting
This is
around.
farting
For
around
other people,
for me.
it may be
Yeah.
very driven and ambitious, and like they feel like even if they don't know what it is, they may feel a great drive to be doing something specific or.
Well,
As long as the reasons for that, I find a lot of people, their reasons, they think that that's what's going on. And like, there are people that are actually like that, but I think a lot of people are being driven by like a shame machine, right? Like you have
right.
to,
The
you
hustle
have to
culture
perform.
and
your productivity is connected directly to your worth.
yeah.
right.
So,
The productivity over health.
Before you decide that you're that kind of person, really sit with it and look at it.
Mhm.
Are you how and a hint about it is that self-talk, right? How are you talking to yourself when you don't do the thing successfully in the way you want it done? Are you like, oh man, I guess I'll try again tomorrow? Or are you like, you piece of shit, I can't believe it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is wrong with you? You can't do anything right.
And it has to be stressed. We talk about self-talk, and this isn't a switch you can just flip.
No.
This is it's a skill you have to practice.
Mhm.
Even myself, even after having done this for a while, I still have to catch myself in those moments where I all of a sudden get angry at myself, and it's literally a matter of thinking like, you fucking no. How can I reword that? I made it into a game because I have to do that with everything. How can I reword you sucked ass at that to something positive? You'll do better at that next time. You're learning. You're improving.
What have I learned here?
What did I do better
And
than
actually-
last time? What will I do better next time?
Jess and I did NLP training together, and this was one of the things that was a huge impact, right? The law of flexibility, okay? This is one of my favorite laws that has ever existed in the social known universe, okay? Basically,
necessary for neurodivergence.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. And the power when you realize the power of this, okay? So it's literally been proven that the person in the situation that is the most flexible is the person that is going to have the most power.
Yes.
Okay? So your power is not in fear, it's in flexibility.
That's actually in the art of war.
Yeah, the more you can ebb and flow. So, like, it's, and the example I always give, and I might have already said it in a different episode, but it's like dealing with bullying as a kid, right? How can you get the upper hand, right? Get weird. Do the thing they're not going to expect you to do.
Yep.
Just completely be nonsensical and confuse that shit out of them.
Yep.
And then they're going to be like, I don't know.
I no longer know the script of this situation.
Or, right, like, if they say something to you that's mean, and they're like, oh, you're so short and gross, blah, and you're like, yeah, man, I know that about myself. You know, this is just how I was born. I've had to learn to accept it, but, like, I hear you. And then they're like, what? Like, you're not getting anything out of this? Like, this isn't, I want you to hurt because I hurt. And you're not hurting, so maybe I don't have to either? Like, it really, like, existential crises yourself into safety.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was totally that guy. Like, crack a joke in an awkward situation. It changes the entire vibe. I am very, and all of my clients that listen will absolutely know this. I'm the first one to crack a joke about pretty much anything, even in session. I have been known to make a joke in hypnosis. I don't care if you laugh. That's fine. I'll just give the suggestion that laughter deepens your trance. It's whatever.
What do they say about comedians, J. Robert?
I mean, a lot of things. Half of them not good. But it's the real thing.
The most resilient people, it's been proven, the people that are the most resilient tend to have, like, a bigger sense of humor, or they use humor more frequently. Because, like, you can't get through things without it. If you're just taking everything seriously all the time, that sounds awful.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, you just realize how ridiculous the whole human experience is,
Well,
right?
hopefully.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and there's a weird lens I put all of my practice through. And it's because I'm very concerned. Like, is the what I'm telling people, is that just limited to privileged Western society, or is this like human advice that I'm giving? And I think to myself, because I watch a lot of like foreign journalism and things like that. Let's say that this was somebody in like the Congo or Syria, somebody that lives in war. Does what I say to them have value? Is it good advice? And I find that that's what I do to try to keep my message. I don't know what it'd be, pure or
Primal?
applicable, I guess, because I noticed that
Or
I
inclusive
I guess, yeah, because I noticed as I was watching
and
these
also
like
divergent.
yeah, as I was watching these documentaries or these news reports, I would see people in hell, like just absolute hell, still laughing, still smiling, still making off-color jokes, and that's kind of one of those things that solidified humor for me. Because I've been in some dark places in my life, and that's what kept me going. I was the one still smiling when everyone else thought that everything was over. Gallows humor, I guess, is what it's called.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that would make a dick joke at my hangman. That's just how it is with me. And it made me realize a lot about that mindset, a lot about using humor and laughter to keep that light, because
Yeah.
we don't even know why we laugh. Like, we have theories, but we don't know why it is. The
Well,
best theory I've
yeah.
heard is the diffusal.
Right. That's what I was
yeah.
going to say. That's what tears are for as well. It's a
Yeah.
balance of hormonal chemicals, right?
Well, because
A release in a
pack
way.
animals. Like, we to be human way back when, we're pack animals. And
We
let's
still
say,
are.
I mean, yeah, we still are. The individualism is completely a joke. But so say we were walking around as a pack and there was a noise in the bush and everyone gets scared. And all of a sudden the person next to the bush sees a rabbit jump out. What do? They laugh. And what does that laughter say? Everything's okay. Everything's fine. We're still all right.
And so it's like a nervous system regulating.
Yes. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was like cancer patients. I remember seeing this, I think it was a documentary on this woman that when she got diagnosed, the first thing she did was rent a new comedy movie every day and would just laugh with her husband. And she overcame stage 4 cancer that way. And it could be luck of the draw. She was just the lucky one.
But at least she was enjoying herself.
At least
through
she
the
was
process.
enjoying it. And that's kind of the thing.
Right? That's the bottom line is, how can you find joy in this process? And when because cleaning is and organizational tasks like that are my biggest issue. Structure in general, right? I mean, when I'm focused, I'm really good at it, but I don't want to. Yeah. So how can that's what I ask myself. How can I make this fun?
Yeah.
Right?
How could you put joy in this process, in this thing?
Because you have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get naked and listen to loud music to do dishes, if that's what makes it fun for you, that's what makes it fun for you. It's not specific. I'm not like giving away my own routine or anything. Sure. And I feel like I'm like outing myself for something right now, but it's just an example. I don't want any ideas.
I think Jess and I talked about this at one point too. Like taking showers, I'll put the tub up on and I'll just sit in it, and I call it a mermaid bath. Right, I call it a mermaid bath because it reminds me of that scene in the movie Peter Pan where which is problematic. The whole movie's problematic, but anyway, where the mermaids are sitting at the waterfall. I don't know why that's where my brain goes, but it does. So I call it a mermaid bath. And so I'll literally, like, if I don't want to shower, I'll do a mermaid bath, and I'll literally sit on the floor for the whole shower. I'll just sit on the bottom of the tub and wash my hair.
Well, I can't
Yeah.
help but wonder how much of that is really primal, because it is the sensation as close, like a man-made sensation of the sense of being in a waterfall and
Yeah.
the pool at the bottom of a waterfall in
Yeah.
Is
nature.
there anything
So,
more magical than that?
right? Yeah,
Well,
try
and it's
turning
a
out
good
the lights
example
when
of
you do that in the
reframing.
Oh, I
bathroom.
never have the lights on, by the way, in the shower. Occasionally, like
Be
I
safe,
will, because
y'all.
I feel
Be
bad
safe.
about
No
not having the
slipping and
fan
falling
on.
in the bathroom.
Yeah, I'll be fine.
But no, this is an excellent example of reframing a task, of just a basic reframing, and adding those things to that experience, to whatever it is that you don't want to do, to make it into an enjoyable experience. And
Right.
that's why I said, voice, I don't like X because
Well,
Y.
and
Well, and you know, another way, especially for people who have like time distortion or problems with time management in their executive functioning,
That'd be
timers.
me.
I mean,
I
you
Yeah.
know,
literally have no concept
be-
of time.
like if you really have an aversion to chores and you have a time management or time distortion issue, you can just set a timer for 5 minutes and do everything you can get done in 5 minutes, and then give yourself a little
Google
dopamine
Calendar
hit
and a stopwatch
afterwards.
has saved my life.
Also, here's a trick, okay? Tell yourself that you're going to do it for 5 minutes. Don't set a timer, and then keep
And then
going.
5 hours
because
later, no.
you don't have a concept of time that will stop you, and then it's done.
Yep. Yep. No,
Make
that's
sure you have a
that's a pretty
timer
good
set
one.
if you have an appointment coming up, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Well,
Like-
you know that I live most
you got to
of
pick
my
up the
life
kids, or
with as little time-based obligation as possible. And I'm actually coming up with a whole model on it, because I can't be the only, like, so Jess and I are both very opposite ends of this, like, time schedule spectrum. So it's kind of funny, because, like, she thrives and needs and to function. Well, I mean, also, you know, the way that our lives are set up.
scheduling.
Right, that scheduling really is cathartic for you. I am literally incapable. Like, I had to just let go of the fact that I can't fucking schedule my life like that. And so
Right.
now I'm creating this process that I'm calling deep presence, for now anyway, where it's about the now, because that's all I can handle. Okay? That is the only, like, why am I trying to not be deeply present with my life when that's the natural tool I was given to experience it? Why am I resisting it? So yes, it does have, like, of course there are some things that I need to do in a timely fashion. But when I minimize those tasks, because sometimes we implement those on ourselves, right? By saying, like, oh, I need to do this by this time. Do you? Do you
Right.
need to?
Shooting on yourself.
I have a
when I
quote
got-
for this.
Yeah.
So
Go
it's
ahead.
Alan Watts for those of you
I love Alan
listening.
Watts.
Alan Watts is amazing. If those of you listening have never listened to Alan Watts's lectures, I highly recommend it. But
Good
you
for-
started mentioning the present, and I saw this recently, and it stuck out to me, and I saved it. It says, "We are living in a culture entirely hypnotized by the illusion of time, in which the so-called present
Yes.
moment is felt as nothing but an infinitesimal hairline between a causative past and an absorbingly important future. We have no
Right.
present. Our consciousness is almost completely preoccupied with memory and expectation."
Mm.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Well, and
It's-
what Molly was saying is a beautiful example of how we have to embrace what works for us, because when I have a structure within to work, I can be present, I can be spontaneous, I can be in the moment. But when I don't have enough structure, then I am more obsessing about,
Mhm.
wait, what's supposed to be happening? What needs to be done? There, you know, so
Yeah. Whereas
harder
I,
to be
Right.
present.
exactly,
me.
like, what helps
But
you be
so-
more present?
So
Exactly.
it's really important that we help people recognize what works for them, and it's
Mhm.
not the same for everyone.
and not worry
Exactly.
about the future and what happened in the past. Just do it in
Right.
this moment. This moment is different. And
Well,
you
some
determine the
people
future.
gain a lot from reflection, and that is a
Mhm.
natural part of who
Okay.
they are too.
Absolutely.
So
But I find reflection super important as well. That's no, I mean more in my, like, physical world, because I am not I'm one of those people that, like, I am so in my head and in the clouds, not in like a self-deprecating way, but in a daydream fantasy way, right?
Same.
Yes.
Like
Me
I
too.
am lost. I am not.
Club
I
daydream.
am very ungrounded.
I cannot tell you how many times my partner has said, I looked you in the face and said that, and you nodded your head. I was like, wasn't there. Just wasn't there. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, no,
First
exactly.
to Jess.
Yeah.
And like, so I find like this practice, that the deep presence that I'm doing, is really about just connecting with my physical world around me. I mean, also, yes, with emotions, right? But that comes more naturally to me. So I tend to focus more on the external environment that I struggle with connecting to. And I will be like, oh, okay, well, I know, like, I am comfortable when doing all the dishes at once when the sink is this full, and I'm seeing it's this full, so I'm going to do them. And it's got nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with this serves me, right? Just like I know that I'm miserable if I don't get a certain amount of sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that, like, depending on where my son is at during the day, he's going to wake up at night, right? So I gauge it like, to serve me, here's what I need to do. And when you make it about serving your own life instead of shaming yourself because I get behind on dishes, and I'm never like mad at myself about it anymore. I used to be. I literally have thrown dishes away, like a laundry basket full of dishes I have put in a dumpster.
Yeah, I've
because
done that.
I
Guilty.
could not
Yep.
do it.
Yep, I have 100% done that.
Over, and I would hide it like
Yep.
a psycho. Like,
Yep.
my nasty dishes.
The dishes are done, man.
For good.
Forever.
Right.
So,
and then I'm like, well, now I don't have dishes.
So, kind of as a wrapping up here, what I want to do, since we kind of talked a lot about executive functioning and peopling today, is each of us kind of give a little piece of advice, either from our own lives as to how we function better, or something that we would tell a client.
Put me on the spot.
I mean,
right?
it happens. I'll go first if that's any consolation. So
I'll just word vomit when it's my turn. It'll be fine.
I mean, that's fine, and that's the thing. It doesn't have to be something you think about. We've all struggled with executive functioning. What is something that you have done personally in your own life to kind of accommodate to yourself better? And mine was, like I said, that the scheduling, but not like stringent scheduling, because I noticed the job I had before this, I was just basically on call every day, quite literally. So I just sat by the phone, waited for calls. And I finally left that job partially because that situation drove me insane. Not knowing what I was going to do. I only knew I had to be here. I didn't have my tasks. Whereas opposed to now, I have my week planned out professionally and halfway personally, because the scheduling exists more for professional means. But it was having that tangible thing, writing those things out. Like I said, Google Calendar and a stopwatch absolutely saved my life. And again, this isn't advice that would necessarily work for everyone. There's people like Molly that you cannot schedule anything. There's people like Jess.
I can schedule a few things.
Well, one or two. But
she showed up here on time.
Yeah, she does. That's the thing. And Molly talks about how she can't schedule or anything. I've never had Molly be late to a single thing.
Because this is my piece of advice. Accept yourself where you're at, okay? Because once you make room for where you're at and you learn to figure out how to love yourself there, I love myself despite the fact, not just despite the fact, but because authentically who I am, I might as well love, right? Because I'm stuck in this flesh prison. I might as well be with it and not just hate myself the whole time I'm here, right?
Absolutely.
So Like, figure out how to love yourself where you're at, and then everything else becomes a little bit easier, right? I can make it on time for the things that I have scheduled with a time obligation without a problem, because I don't fill my life with all of these unnecessary time obligations. And even with like my kids' appointments and my appointments and things like that, I make sure to sprinkle them out. Unless I can do them back to back and I don't have to leave and it feels like one big appointment.
Yep.
I will be like, okay, like my kids went to the dentist, so now I gotta wait a little bit and then I'll go to the dentist when I like have space.
Yep.
Right?
Accommodating for that space.
Right.
That's a big one. Absolutely. And
Right?
it's the
Because
recognition.
there's that emotional labor and shame that is removed. And now I have more executive functioning to apply to the things that are important.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that giving yourself permission
Mm-hmm.
to, if something isn't working for you with your executive functioning, to try something else, and to give yourself grace in that trial and error, and
Mhm.
not beat yourself up if you go through even, a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen different trials before you find the thing that works for you.
Always encourage
And then-
yourself. Yeah.
Or you could be
And
spending
then-
the rest of your life doing this and be okay with
Mhm.
that. Think
And
of it
that's
that way.
okay, right?
Right.
And also permission to communicate about it.
Mhm.
Because so often a part of that, like, negative self-talk comes from a disconnect with the humans in your life about what you're doing, what you're experimenting with, and like you guys said earlier, that from the outside, it may look really different. What you're going through may look really different from the outside.
Yep.
So if you can begin to say, hey, I'm trying this new thing to support myself in A, B, C, D, in my life. And I just wanted to let you know that's like what's going on. And, next week I may try something different if this doesn't work. But, communicating with the different people, like you said, when you schedule an appointment, hey, I actually can only schedule appointments on this date. You actually don't have to explain to anyone why you're doing it the way
No.
you're doing it. But if you want to, you can.
It's like a
You know?
step in the process, right? Like at first,
Yeah.
I used to over-explain, and then I realized that
Yeah.
I was at a point where it would benefit me to learn to just be like, "Thanks for understanding."
Yep.
Yes.
This is my rule. This is my thing. This is how I
Right?
work.
Because people won't question it, and if they do,
No.
it's a personal thing for them, right?
Yes.
It's not about you.
Yeah. And it's defining those things. So awesome, guys. Well, this has been always fun hanging out and having a talk with you guys. I want to remind everyone listening to remember to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Anchor, and all of the numerous places we're propagated as an audio podcast. Follow us on Facebook, all of that good stuff. And as usual, if you guys ever have any questions about anything we've said, you want to reach out to us, go to the website, hypnodivergence.com. Reach out to us, hypnodivergence@gmail.com. Otherwise, thank you very much, guys. Y'all have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I know we've talked about putting any resources down below that we discussed.
Mhm.
I put down below because there'll be a down below.
Yeah.
But and I'll try to get my blog post up because I know we referenced that earlier. By the time that this goes out,
Yes.
and so we can put it down below.
Perfect.
Either way, it'll be at hedgewitchhypnosis.com at some point.
Yep. And again, go to the website. It has all of our individual link trees, how to get a hold of us, all of that good stuff. So, all right. Well, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you all for joining me. And I will talk to you guys next time. This has been the HypnoDivergence Podcast. Bye.